Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and I'm out on another walk. I'm up on the Southdowns and it's absolutely beautiful. I love coming up here. It's just wonderful. In today's episode, I've done something slightly different. It's quite windy actually. I've just come into a bit of shelter here. I'm just above Lancing and Sompting, and I'm on the hills that go north. And there's a wind that's coming from, I guess it's coming from the east. So I suppose it's an east wind, and it's blowing quite badly. So I've taken a bit of shelter so I can record. But in this episode, as I say, I've done something slightly differently. I've written a sort of lament, if you like, for the Southdowns, and I thought I'd read it to you today. What I love about walking on the Southdowns is the vast remoteness of it. Although it is in the southeast of England, one of the most populated parts of Great Britain, you can walk up onto this beautiful, undulating chalk ridge and amble along for an hour or so and barely see anyone. It's a great place to come to meditate, collect your thoughts, or clear the cobwebs from your mind. But it wasn't always like that. Before humans, the whole of the country was a wild place, a tangle of trees and smaller plants, grasses and wildlife. A host of extraordinary creatures crawled, walked, flew and slithered over this place. Mother Nature ruled. And then people came. At first, the nomadic souls, wandering the hilltops and ridgeways where it was easier and safer to be, hunting and gathering food as they found it. We're talking many thousands of years ago, but in time they settled and began to develop skills as farmers, growing their own crops and learning husbandry, breeding animals for the table as well as working machines to make their life easier. Tribes of people populated these fine chalky hills, just as I imagine they did on others up and down the land, the Purbeck Hills in Dorset, or the Mendips in Somerset, the Chilterns, which of course spans across Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire, Herefordshire and Bedfordshire, and of course all the other ranges that crisscross this island. And as a result, the tree-covered land was deforested, opened up, ploughed, and crops grown. An enormous amount of trees were removed, and this continued for generations. The Neolithic folk on the Southdowns mined for flint, making arrowheads and axes, among other things, and they traded them, not just locally, but far up north and across in Europe. We would have found groups of these folk trudging along the tracks up here on the downs as they peddled their wares. We know that human nature is infused with greed, and warring tribes would have attacked one another to gain power, poverty and respect. And so, in the Iron Age, hill forts were erected, built with the most primitive of tools, but with incredible organisation. Somewhere like Sisbury Ring, for example, must have taken hundreds, if not thousands of men, and women too, to construct, with its ditch and rampart and mile-long palisade of wood on the top. The Southdowns was a busy place indeed. When the Romans came, there was more upheaval, and temples replaced the old pagan religious sites. Strong, sturdy roads crossed the downs, and timber and tile villas with beautiful mosaics, underfloor heating and modern farming techniques took root along the base of the hills. Soon it was the turn of the Angles, Jutes and Saxons to inhabit this 100-mile length of chalkland. They ignored the solid, impressive and state-of-the-art cities the Romans had built, the palaces and housing, choosing the simpler, more familiar roundhouses and communal ways of life they brought with them, perching them high up on the ridge and nestling them in the combes and valleys. Viking raids came and went, and terrible battles ensued, and then the Normans, another form of Viking, and once again England was turned upside down. The rivers were guarded, castles erected, churches converted from timber to stone. Farming escalated, and the Downs became the industrialised home of sheep breeding. Although the Saxons had developed the feudal system and built their manor houses, it was the Normans who really turned this into a well-oiled, streamlined way of life. For 1,000 years, the Southdowns was populated by livestock, shepherds, farmers, itinerant travellers, merchants and their train of pack horses, donkey-riding pedlars, pilgrims crossing the ancient tracks to visit holy places and pay their respects, and knights on horseback, soldiers on foot, and visitors from abroad. During the 2 world wars, the military used the escarpment for training, manoeuvres and practice. The government instructed farmers to tear up the pasture and grow food, because the convoys of shipping bringing the important supplies to us from the other countries were under daily attack from the enemy, and we would starve without homegrown produce. With the Second World War, in particular, came necessary technical improvements. Instead of horse and plough, tractors were used, many brought over from America. And then, after the war, where many workers were engaged in preparing the land and harvesting the crops, mechanisation began to do it for them. So much so that work was scarce in the countryside, and folk turned to the towns for different types of work and employment. And before you knew it, a great hush drew over the Downs. Peace reigned. But with peace, neglect, and it was really only relatively recently that the South Downs was turned into a national park and thus protected. It is now a place promoted for leisure. So it is possible to walk along the old byways and trading routes and barely see a soul. A dog walker perhaps, or a serious hiker and their bright-coloured outdoor clothing and backpack, the occasional horse rider from nearby stables, a cyclist on his or her mountain bike, and maybe, if you're really lucky, a farmer in a 4x4 or on a quad bike zipping along to feed some sheep. It is very tranquil and lovely up here on the Downs now, but to my mind it is also quite sterile. The human story here on the Downs, which for many thousands of years took place, has dwindled to barely anything. The communities appear to have gone. The old professions and traditions vanished. Celebrations and those wonderful festivals now just a distant memory and fading quicker every year. In some ways it just seems a bit of a shame. And that change really has taken place over the last 80 years, since the end of the Second World War. And it is quite frightening, the rapid pace of change. I don't know what you think about it, but it does make me worry about the future. It's all very interesting. Don't forget to follow, like and subscribe. Leave a comment. If you like this sort of thing, I'll do more. In the meantime, you can of course become a patron and support what I do, help me get out and about in the countryside and make more of these videos. And I'll see you on the next one. Till then, thanks for watching. Bye bye.